When protesters come with a paycheck, who's really speaking? This isn't just an isolated case. Independent journalist נייט Friedman has been investigating a growing trend in major U.S. cities, including New York and Washington, D.C. We spoke with him to dig into who's behind these paid protesters and what's really at stake. It seems lately more and more in the headlines are protests over all sorts of issues, but are these organic or are they paid for? Well, we have with us a very special guest. He's an independent journalist who's found out these are paid protesters. So, נייט Friedman, thank you so much for joining us. Great to have you here.
Thanks for having me.
So talk to us about, how you found out a lot of these are paid protesters. Did you go in there knowing this, or did you find this out organically?
No, I found it out organically, actually. So there was a big Tesla takedown protest in downtown New York City, and I was struck by how Elon was loved by the left prior to Trump winning. And I saw things switch on a dime, and not just against him, but calling him a Nazi. And as a Jew who had family who've died in the Holocaust, I took that to heart. So I wanted to know what was really going on. So when I went there, I immediately was confronted by a woman who had a troll sign and just followed me. So she looked to have a picture of me on her phone as one of the people sort of that they have to ensure that can't ask questions there, which is pretty crazy. And then I was trying to do any kind of interviews I could, and more protesters would come in with big right-wing troll arrows, and they would have teammates that would beg the person that I'm trying to interview to not do the interview. So that's when I realized, okay, this is not organic.
Wow. So you were just going up to people being like, hey, why are you here? And people were, first off, they had a photo of you. So they knew who you were. Yeah,
they knew who I was. They were taking more photos to intimidate me, but she knew who I was right when I walked in.
That is crazy. Well, often it's been said to follow the money. So in this case, I assume you followed the money. Where did the money lead?
Sure. So for this particular protest, it was funded by Rise and Resist, which is funded by George Soros. And you can see that they take money through Act Blue. Act Blue is the Democrat fundraising platform. So People's Forum, which I'm sure we'll talk about later, but also has to do with Rise and Resist, because People's Forum is also funding Rise and Resist as well. So, yeah.
That's a lot. Speaking of People's Forum, I know you've spoken to someone named David Chung a couple times. Speaking might be a bit generous since he was saying no comment, but we actually have a clip of you trying to speak to him. So let's actually roll that now, and then we'll have you comment.
Of course. Yo, what's up, David? See you again, man. You want to talk at all about the last video? No, I'm good. What did you think of it?
No comment.
Did I get anything wrong?
No comment.
You got no comment? Bro, they're paying you $80K a year to protest? Is that wrong? Is that wrong? Tell me if it's wrong.
No comment.
Do you think that, what's that? You gonna stop him from interviewing me? What do you want to prevent him to say?
Getting ready to march.
Right, so there's a couple different times you ran into him. There's a lot to unpack there. There's a lot of money thrown around, the group he's with, but break down for us a bit. Who is he? What group is he with? And, why were you trying to talk to him?
So how I met David Chung was I was trying to speak to a protester who had a large flag that said, Allah is the only God. And I wanted to just have a conversation with him. This was after Trump struck Iran, and I wanted to know what was going on. So David Chung immediately comes over to prevent the interview. I didn't know who David was at the time, but he said, we're getting ready to march, which is blatantly saying that he's organizing everything. So looking into David, I saw that on the 990 forms of the People's Forum, he is getting paid $75,000 a year to protest. I asked him about $80K, hoping that he might correct me and say, no, it's actually $75K a year to protest, but I gave him a chance to speak his mind about it, but he refused.
That is insane. So $75,000 to protest.
Yeah. Crazy, right?
So he's with something called the People's Forum. Where is that kind of money coming from? Who's funding People's Forum?
Yeah, so Roy Neville Singham, who is a billionaire Marxist, which obviously, it's hard to believe, but yes, he sold his IT consulting firm to a private equity firm for $775 million, $785 million. And they had firms in China when he sold it to them, so there could be something there. Anyway, he's given over $20 million to the People's Forum through something called a donor advised fund, which is when you don't want people to know where the money's coming from, you put it through what was called the Goldman Sachs Philanthropy Fund. So it's not traced back to Roy Neville Singham. However, investigations absolutely revealed that it was. And then later on, People's Forum said, we'd like to thank our comrade, Roy Neville Singham, for supporting us. So, yeah.
They even use that language, comrade.
Yeah.
Insane. So Roy Neville Singham, there's a lot of reports about him, quite controversial, right? Ties to China, as you mentioned. Marxist billionaire, so the ideology of supporting socialism or eventually communism but with a lot of money to actually produce change, if you will, in that direction. So what is his goal with funding all of this protest?
Yeah, so you can see that at the People's Forum, they have a bookstore in downtown New York, and you can see that they've actually doing classes on Marxism and socialism, and they have a lot of young people that come in to learn about it, and they put a very positive spin on Marxism and socialism that historically has never worked. But young people come in through their hatred of Zionism, so they use Zionism as a springboard to get them into socialism and Marxism. So it's an effective way to do things, actually.
I want to dig into that a bit because we actually have another clip of you trying to talk to another protest, and then someone blocks that. So let's get into that and then see what's happening over there.
Muhammad. Hey man, how you been, buddy?
Hey.
Good to see you.
Oh, you take me last time interview,
Yeah,
right?
how you doing?
Good, how are you?
So that's really interesting because, again, it's that same line. We're about to march.
Right.
That
Yeah,
David
exactly.
was saying.
Yeah, it's very scripted. Yeah. So she's taken photos with the PSL, like as an advertisement for the Party of Socialism and Liberation, who the shooter of the DC embassy couple, the beautiful couple who was killed in DC, was killed by Elias Rodriguez, who was actually once was part of the Chicago chapter of the PSL. The PSL is funded by the People's Forum. Now, the PSL stands with North Korea. They stand for open borders and abolishing the police and ICE. So you can see that through this hatred of Zionism, they're able to get people on board with radical policies such as open borders and getting rid of the police.
I do want to dig into this because it's like, you know, often in the news, everyone's like, oh, First Amendment rights, of course, people should be expressing what they feel. But in terms of D.C., there's been a lot of protests in the nation's capital since Trump 2.0. And there's actually a crowd rental company. It's called Crowds on Demand. And it was telling Fox D.C. that inquiries to basically rent a crowd are up 400% compared to last year. And they're saying that the vast majority of people in these protests in our nation's capital are getting paid. So these aren't just the voice of the people, right, actually trying to rise up in the streets. What have you seen in terms of that? Obviously not in D.C., but in New York.
Yeah, so the truth is a lot of these protesters are not paid, but the organizers are paid. A lot of them are paid, but it doesn't mean that every single one is paid. There's thousands of protesters in New York City blocking the streets. But if we look at Victoria, for example, so the one who blocked my interview, so her working with the PSL, she came from Canada. So I think that maybe it's time to look at who we're bringing into this country and if they love our country, because maybe we should only bring in people into our country if they love our values.
We do see that this administration is trying to do a vetting process or the merit-based system, right? There's a couple of different questions, including morals, to your point. Now, in terms of, you know, a broader picture here with Singham, there's some questionable ties, perhaps to China. We know he is Marxist sympathizing in that direction. Where do you see kind of communist China fitting in here, or does China fit in here?
Yeah, well, China's very, very difficult to see what they're doing. They're very good at hiding what their strategies are. But I can only say what I've seen firsthand, which is that this bookstore is teaching kids, young kids, whatever, 18, 19 years old, about socialism being a good thing. I mean, communism being a good thing. If we look at, a wise man once told me that if you want to see if communism works, socialism works, just look at the satellite view of South Korea and North Korea at night, and there's your answer. So, wish they would do that in those classes.
That's a good point. I want to continue that a bit because, you know, lately our institutions of higher education have been in the news a lot for anti-Semitism, blatant, you know, all these protests, uprisings, if you will, that you see on campus, to the point that there's more reports now suggesting that these are actually indoctrination centers, similar to, you know, teaching kids about Marxism. Have you seen stuff like that on college campuses, or suggesting that perhaps our institutions of higher education are more leaning towards indoctrination?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's not just colleges. The frightening thing is that it's happening to kids that are much, much younger. For example, I exposed a paid protester who teaches gender expansive youth, like 11-year-olds. So this is sick behavior, and it's tax funded as well. She's funded by New York City taxpayers, and there's also a Sadie Leadership scholarship that she's working with over the summer. So they're teaching these kids over the summer about gender ideology. So this is not just about colleges, it's going into elementary and middle school as well.
And given all this, right, the young kids, the colleges, the protests in the streets, what is the end goal here? Is there an end goal with all of this?
I think it's to destroy the West. I think it's to destroy everything that America stands for.
And given that, right, what have you seen in terms of, I don't know, crackdown, enforcement? Are you seeing more awareness on what's happening?
Well, it's tough to say. I mean, some protester tried to attack me the other day, and there were a lot of police there, but I was told to not antagonize him, but I was not even talking to him. I was actually doing another interview. So I think that police are not exactly sure what to do with these protests because they're getting so large. But so many of them are doing such good work. Like the NYPD is doing incredible work to actually make sure these things don't get out of control. But when they get out of control, it's very tough to deal with.
Do you know, in terms of the money trails, we've seen the new FBI Director Kash Patel saying that the FBI at least will be pursuing all the trails, connections to the money that's behind some of these protests, where it leads perhaps to China. Do you think more administration or offices in the administration will follow up on trying to find where that money is? And to your point, maybe even into immigration, who's coming over the borders?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I think the administration has done an impeccable job at this. And it's not just the administration, but Congress as well, because they have a House Oversight Committee that's looking into Singham. So real action looks to be being taken. So we're just going to have to wait and see. But these are all recent developments after Trump got into office, yeah.
And given all your experiences at protests, say someone who's on the street, maybe they're curious about what's happening at a protest. What's your advice to them? Like, what should they look out for to see if it is A, an organic protest, and B, if it turns violent, as it does in some cases? What's your advice to these people to stay safe?
Yeah, so be next to the police if you really feel like it's about to get very violent. The police are good, just stay next to them. And if you want to see whether, it's very organic, not very organic, look at the speakers, look at the huge signs with the organization's name on them. These signs are printed, it's organized. So that's what I would look for, the gigantic signs and the long line of speakers that they've booked for their protest.
Reports the BLM protests where you just see pallets of bricks that showed up, or very fancy signs, if you will.
Even in LA, they brought riot masks and whatnot.
These aren't cardboard signs, right? These took more than one night to make, for instance. I saw some jokes online where they're like the only ones who benefit are the ones selling the flags, because every day there's a new protest and who's buying the flags? Well, but with all the different areas covered today, any final thoughts you'd like to share?
Well, I would just ask that people really wake up to what's going on. Over 20 protests, and just to look and see that these people are being paid, but a lot of these folks are getting indoctrinated through colleges, through things like the People's Forum, and to understand that Mamdani looks to be getting elected, and that means that young people are pro-socialism. Socialism has never worked, so it's time to wake up.